Welcome to Wired for Change. Today is going to be about cutting through the noise, looking at the strategies, technology, and people who are shaping the future of digital resilience. I'm your host, Amy Yee. Today's show is about one of the most persistent and costly cyber threats there are out there, ransomware. You've heard the headlines: hospitals shutting down systems, municipalities paying out millions, critical infrastructure being pushed to the brink. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Even organizations with most modern endpoint detection and response tools often leave about 20% of their threat window uncovered. And here's where a lot of the damage can happen. That's why I'm so excited today to have with me two leaders who are tackling that 20% challenge head on. I've got Jarett Parent, who's the CEO of C3SA, who brings decades of cybersecurity advisory experience in sectors where downtime isn't a thing. You can't afford that downtime. And we've got Greg Davison, head of revenue at Mimic, who represents the next generation of observability-first cybersecurity or ransomware defense, designed to stop attackers in their tracks before they touch critical systems. We're going to look at why focusing on the good can outperform trying to focus on catching every single instance of bad. We're going to look at why observability patterns are changing the game for defenders, and why this partnership is poised to really start to close the gap. Welcome, Greg and Jarett.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Now, I talked a little bit about the landscape for ransomware, and I know that Mimic recently hosted a webinar where you talked just about this landscape kind of issue and what things look like right now. I was wondering if you could give us some of your takeaways from that webinar.
When you look at some of the trends, I'll throw some stats out. Ransomware Live over the weekend, 5,000 reported incidents of ransomware around the world, 200 this month. And the FBI says, caveat, that that's only 25%. So only 25% gets reported. So there's a lot of incidents. I think there's different kinds of ransomware. There's the normal, or what we've seen, where our technology stack, for the most part, companies have technology that can detect and stop. But when you look at the modern instances of ransomware and how the adversaries or the threat actors are using something modern, like a ransom hub or a lockbit, these are technologies where when threat actors actually pay to consume and use that as a service, ransomware as a service is actually an acronym. You get a dashboard, you get a help desk, you get a executable that is unique, almost 0 day by description, that the hashtag and signature has not been seen before. And that becomes very dangerous and extremely difficult to drive defenses with current technology.
And Jarett, what about you from your vantage? What are you seeing in terms of the threat landscape?
I would say, I'd echo what Greg said, but I would add on that in terms of it really falls down to tactics as well. Having that observability that you already talked about, having the telemetry and being dialed in. A lot of these attacks are coming in through various vectors that could be covered, like phishing and vulnerabilities and credential stuffing, which means that they've got time and nothing but time on that network to learn the network, how it's managed, how it's organized and structured, better than the way that the people that manage it on the day-to-day, right? They're definitely more successful and have a higher likelihood of landing on the box, because it's impossible to detect them unless you have certain protections, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, you're hitting on a great point. We're seeing, from my 9 years at Mandiant, you saw early instances of smash and grab, and now there's definitely more of a long game plan with a lot of these threat actors, and there's persistence, right? So they have a plan, and for example, living off the land is the term that you hear more of today. It's extremely hard to do, but given how good some of the tech is, it's a lot of ways how people are getting around it, right? They get their command and control and they're able to live off the land. We can talk more with that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So traditional tool set and what how people practice today. There's something that they need to change. Essentially, there's something that's changing in the landscape right now that people need to respond to.
I think it's an arms race. It's always going to be an arms race. And I also think that almost any tech out there is an underbelly in some way if you actually are exposed long enough to it and you can find it. We need new defenses that are unknown in order to drive levels of protection, right?
Sounds good.
Having done a lot of work in the area of red teaming and IR, most red team firms have kill shots for a lot of the modern tech that's out there. I'm not going to get too much into that, but it's there. And so layering is really important, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we need to just continue to evolve as this evolves and get ahead
Can't
of it.
stay still. Got to stay ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's learn a little bit more about Mimic. So Mimic, I think, was founded in 2023. You've raised a number of rounds of venture funding and emerged out of stealth in 2024.
Yeah.
I think. Tell us a little bit more about Mimic's origin story, and of course, how you joined Mimic as well.
Yeah. So our two founders are great humans. Derek Smith is our CEO. He spent time with the Pentagon. He spent time as an executive with Raytheon, spent time as an executive with F5, very, very smart and very forward with technology. Ransomware is important to him personally because he had a niece that was actually in a hospital in the middle of an operation. Nothing life-threatening, but still, hospital had an incident, they had to go to manual. Unacceptable. There was a time back before COVID where not-for-profits and healthcare centers were off the table for threat actors, and it's now in focus, which I'm just so not a fan of.
Yeah.
So that's one. Two, our second founder, Bob Blakely, and he's a mastermind with how we're actually built differently, and we'll talk about that. But he spent a long career in various capacities, but 8 years running risk at Citi, so you get to see everything, when you're in an environment like that, literally everything. And he also spent some time at one of our VC firms, Team 8. And Mimic, part of the ideation came out of that with both Bob and Derek talking about mutually wanting to go at this problem and addressing it. Bob has a wife that's worked her whole time in hospitals in Texas. So similar stories around this. And so there's a bit of a personal mission to actually solve some of this.
I love that.
Yeah.
And having come from healthcare, myself, I think it's so important. Yeah.
So started in 23, moving extremely fast. A lot of our DNA has shape employees in it. So it's fascinating that we're a couple years old, but it feels like you're working in a company with people with 7-year tenure because they have worked together that long and code together that long. So that's fascinating. And then we just have great backing, right? I mean, we've got Ballistic in the portfolio and Wing and Team 8 and Google Ventures and some more to come.
And what are you focused on right now?
What are we focused on
stage?
right now? I think for us, it's getting the word out is really important. We just hired a lady that's leading marketing for us. We've been extremely successful without doing a lot of educating and broadcasting of what we do. And so it's time now that we've got everything hardened and everything's working well to just make sure that we get all the right exposures out and people understand that there is an alternative for layering into some of those environments. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. And then what do you see in your C3SA partnership? And we'll get to, C3SA in a second.
So we don't do services. When I look at my time at Mandiant, we always led with services. They are so critical, and you can't rely on a tech to drive defense for you. You have to do the right things up front. You have to be proactive. You have to have good hygiene. And when I look at C3SA and the reputation that C3SA has, it's exceptional, plus clearances and all the things that we look for, frankly, in a partner. So they know their clients know them, their clients trust them. We're a piece of technology that helps to, prevent something at the last line of defense, but they're doing all the work up front to make sure that everything is hardened and, military grade. So I think it's great.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
Jarett, tell us a little bit more about C3SA now.
Well, I mean, we've been servicing national security and critical infrastructure for a little over 20 years now. We're at a point in our storyline where we're really focused on relationships and connections. That means good clients, good partners, right? We really focus on the services that we deliver and helping clients build those capabilities through our advisory consulting, like at a strategic level or operational level. And we're still very much into the day-to-day technical and the tactical aspects of it as well, right? So, yeah.
Lots of fun. And so what is it that you see in Mimic?
I think we, beyond a product, they have an amazing, innovative product and innovative roadmap, coupled by just an incredible team of leaders that are top notch. In addition to the quality that goes into everything that they do, into their process and their thinking, and it's a perfect relationship, really, to find a partner to work with that's like that. We see eye to eye on a lot of frontiers as well, which is it's easier to align with them.
Excellent.
Yeah, you guys understand cyber deep, which is super valuable.
Yeah.
Some people learn acronyms. Some people have, all the scars and history, and you guys have all that. So you got the street cred.
Yeah. And that's one thing about C3SA. I mean, we've never been just a cyber-focused shop.
Yeah.
It is like we are experts in privacy, security, cyber defense, and cyber resilience as well. And we find little bits of that in Mimic as well, right? To even drive compliance, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on down the road. They truly have a unique offering.
I think that's a good fit. I was in Charlotte on Friday, and we were having a roundtable with a bunch of CISOs and BISOs, new title.
What's a BISO?
Business alignment.
Okay.
Talking a little bit more of the business.
Yeah.
It's almost gluing the business side with the
Makes sense.
technical. It's cool for big companies. So that's a new title that I think I learned about 6 months ago, right? And the conversation was centered around how cyber and like physical security are seeing emerge, and convergence even of activity, right?
Right.
When we look at some of the social engineering that some of the threat actors out there are really good at now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, from a business perspective, that certainly makes a lot of sense. And it's something that resonates with me really well, and from a transformation perspective, because everything has really got to be aligned with the business. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this love story that you guys have here. And, congratulations, right? Congratulations on just announcing the partnership as well. So that's terrific. So let's look a little bit more at the solution. I'm going to start with, of course, Mimic, looking at, that whole idea of focusing on what good looks like, and as opposed to the bad. Because as someone who's run kind of cybersecurity within the organizations that I've been in, I know how hard it is to try to catch every instance of bad. So, what is the approach here that you're talking about for our audience?
You've done your research, Amy, so thank you. We can get as deep as you want. High level, most tech that's been out that we see in companies are designed to look for, hunt for, detect bad. And so you're using things like filtering. It's one of the core components you see everyone use. And so you're looking for that next bad thing, and there's networks where if some company sees something bad comes through, you get these quick updates so that it can't be used elsewhere, and that's all really good. But I think where you run into some challenges is where ransomware, as an example, is well executed, or malware is well executed, and a threat actor has taken the time to take an executable and change it enough so the hash and signature are new and not detected and not caught in filters. Huge problem. And when you look at, not to name names, but most recently you see Ingram, and you see Whole Foods distributor, and you see Cartier and Victoria's Secret and Harrods. These are all companies that have $500 million security budgets and doing all the right things. They really are. They've got a lot of people focusing on that. But they're seeing something like a Dragon Force come through and be effective because it is unknown, unseen at that point. And so Mimic, we look at that and say that it's time for a new defense strategy. And we're not saying replace your EDR. EDR has a place, it's valuable. What we are saying is, as an alternative layered defense mechanism, you can install Mimic on your critical assets, meaning what are the applications, if I asked a company, what are the applications where if one of those were to fail, you stop operating? Your website doesn't operate like Victoria's Secret, or you can't do transactions, or you can't book reservations. And it's hard to, C3SA is able to help with that crown jewels assessment. And some companies need help actually figuring out what is that list. And that's a really good thing to do regardless, just for hygiene for CISOs. But when you understand what those critical assets are, Mimic installs, and we essentially create an application immutability shield around the critical components for each of those applications. Meaning, there's core pieces of the operating system that can't fail, otherwise that app fails. There's core services, there's core data. We understand all those intricacies, and then we monitor it and profile it, where we come up with what a good normal state looks like. And then we just protect that. There's a little bit of game theory where we deliberately leave some pieces outside or exposed from that immutability shield, where if a threat actor is attempting to launch ransomware at an IP address, namely a server, take down an application, we want them to see a report back that says they were partly successful. And the idea is they ideally leave that alone and go on to potentially next target. But so that's what we do. And that application immutability, the concept of this shield, rather than driving detection, we call deflection, because deflection literally happens in milliseconds, less than a second. And you really need that in a world where ransomware has the ability to take down an application with encryption in anywhere from 10 to 90 seconds. Humans don't have time, technology doesn't have time to drive traditionally and actually be effective in that kind of a situation, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's helpful, Greg. And then I guess from just a practical standpoint, if I'm listening to you, I might be thinking, well, so many things are changing in my environment right now. I'm adopting all kinds of new tools. I'm trying to figure out AI. I'm trying to do all kinds of things. Maybe it's a transformation in my organization. How do I even know what good looks like? And how do I stay in sync with what Mimic is offering?
I think that's an even higher level question, right? The CISO role is a very difficult role today.
Yeah.
And I think there's two functions. One is not driving innovation, but enabling innovation. So companies choose to invest in certain things for competitive advantage efficiencies. You can't be preventative of that. You need to show how that can be adopted. But secondly, reducing risk always, right? So enabling innovation, reducing risk. And I do see struggles. We actually had a conversation with a customer not long ago where they said, I'm very interested in Mimic because of how you're designed. Ransomware is on our list, yes, but my bigger challenge is I've got this agentic AI thing. And agentic is the word of 2025. I don't like it. It's just so overused. We're all sort of done with it, right? Yeah. And there'll be a new adjective for AI next year. But if you're focused on that, if you've got a board that's saying, hey, we're 30% of our IT investment has to go towards AI and agentic things, as the guy holding the security bag, how do I enable that for the business while providing the immutability or reducing the risk or hardening so that there isn't exposure? Because we see examples already where agency means that AI is able to go out, take in some data and make decisions on their own, which is a little scary. So this one CISO I was talking to said, what I want to do, I want to put Mimic on my critical apps that should never see any change. And the idea is that if something agentic attempts a change there, we're going to harden it and say, no, you can't. And they're going to get an alert that a human can then investigate and say, yeah, that can be applied there or it can't. But that application doesn't have a risk of an unauthorized change taking it down. And then there's a second tier of apps where the idea is apply Mimic in like a monitor mode. And we're going to let agency do its thing. But if something did go bump in the night, we have this incredible set of forensics where we can do all the rollback, where you typically, in our space, you see a lot of network forensics, you see very limited application forensics. So we built out this really critical asset where you can look at the rollback on that if something did go bump in the night and an application had a problem, and we can help them fix it real quick. Okay. So ransomware and a few other use cases evolving just based on the architecture of how we're built.
That's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting. Jarett, I wanted to ask you just to help us with the lens of, what do organizations need to know? We talked a little bit about, varying levels of maturity and readiness for figuring this out and for, adopting something like Mimic or for even understanding kind of the threat landscape. What are some of the things that, CISOs need to know as they think about, ransomware right now, maybe if they're very early in their maturity and then maybe if they're a little bit later on in terms of how all this fits together?
You're never really truly prepared. And most CISOs, if we're talking at an early maturity stage, they certainly don't have the budget or they don't have the human capital, right? And they probably have a program that doesn't cover their bases from their risk appetite perspective, right? And that's where something like Mimic provides that last line of defense, but it also helps them mature their program. Like from a readiness standpoint, Mimic has a signal generator, right? That you can actually use for simulations and you can use for tabletop exercises to slowly mature the program and enhance your capabilities over time. In addition to knowing that it's sitting there at the kernel level, right? Looking at every process, all the telemetry coming in from the network, all the hooks, in addition to the application immutability, right? So with Mimic, you kind of touch all the four bases that is really at the core of C3SA is the privacy, the cybersecurity, the cyber defense, and the cyber resilience. And Greg brought up an excellent point. Like one of the dirty secrets right now, from an application security program perspective, we have not figured out how to do application logging, right? So when there's a session crossover or something, abnormal happens within the application, it is very difficult to go back and trace the connection and the account that it was connected to and the session, right? With Mimic, we don't have to worry about that. The forensic logs are there, right? And the shield is around that. So we can actually dissect it and provide that report as well out to whatever regulator from a compliance perspective or to the eyes on glass, fingers on keys team that are mobilized to go out and do forensics and response, right? Rapid response. So it's.
But when you get into a real incident, I don't think I've ever seen a customer that said, "Man, I have more than enough forensics." Forensics is your cheat sheet, right? It's your disclosure. It's your dash cam in an accident where you can actually roll back and understand what happened and how did lateral movement work. And these are all critical things because you can go and address, a piece of malware or something happening on your network, but you need assurances. The board needs assurances you've eradicated the threat actor from the environment. How do you actually prove that, right? And so there are some great tools out there on network. We don't do that. We're going to build some links I think in some future releases to be able to share what we can see from just the application because there's some really neat stuff and more to come on that. But I would say for sure on the application side, there's been a real lack and we're filling a bit of a gap there.
On that alone, during an incident, time is everything, right?
Yeah.
You simply don't have the time to do forensics as well during a response, depending on the environment. The cost savings there is substantial. It's significant, right? A bill coming from a forensic team coming in off the street, stepping into your environment where you probably don't have the logs, and we have to cobble things together to basically attribute where it's coming from and what the impact and how big this thing really is, up to the board tomorrow or even this afternoon, right? It provides a source of truth for us to go to immediately and drill right into probably the lifeblood of the organization other than the data, right? It's those crown jewels that you was talking about, the critical assets. Yeah. Everything's an application nowadays.
So one other point you're hitting on here I think is important. We talk about ransomware. Ransomware and extortion go hand in hand now, right?
Yeah.
Years ago, we talked about just ransomware. You see extortion. A lot of that has to do with data exfil. And forensics on application, whether it's a ransomware situation or not, let's say it's not, you have the ability to look in the forensic file and you have an audit to show if a piece of data was looked at, tampered with, exfilled, attempted exfilled. So if you are a company that has to report based on the situation, you might have 100,000 clients, but maybe there's only 1,200 records that were potentially affected. Your blast radius gets reduced and you actually have a plan now to work with that's going to be much less costly than something they have to go and tell everybody. Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it helps us quantify it. So with the breach coach, with the insurers, and the regulators as well, right? That we know this amount of files that containing personal information or personal health information have been compromised, or these credit cards, these gift cards have been compromised, as opposed to going out and just saying the whole thing's been compromised. We have to send notifications out to every card brand out there, every employee, every patient. You know, we can drill down and specifically say it's this set, right? That limits the damage and the cost, the immediate cost to recover, which I'm sure we're going to get into, but also the reputation, the brand, right? It means you're back up as quickly as possible, right? With minimal damage.
I feel like it was 5 years ago that there was a lot of credit card breaches happening. And the number of Equifax offers I had where I had a free year for me and my wife and my kids for credit detail. I mean, it got so repetitive. I'm probably still available a subscription for free, right? It was just, and it's the right thing to offer that to clients, but on point.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that point. And I have I've been in those shoes where it's kind of like we have to tell everybody, like how do we limit this and how do we recover as quickly as possible?
There's a reputational risk there.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And so I'd like to pick up on that just from a board perspective, look at a scenario to make this even more real for the folks who are watching today. Let's say I've just kind of gone through an incident and my board is asking me, okay, what am I doing now to prepare and rebuild and to be, better prepared for next time as an organization, let's say. What is it that you would say to me in terms of moving forward?
We've implemented robust safeguards. That's the key word when you're talking to the privacy commissioners, if they're watching. But it's really coming up with, a program and modernizing that program, building your in-house capability around and augmenting it with your tool set as well, right? Making sure that the most important things are key priority, and that's the crown jewels, the critical assets, your supply chain even, right?
And I didn't have like Mimic or the tools before, right? So what do I need to do now to start getting ready? I need to identify my crown jewels. Probably I know them now because
Hopefully
maybe,
right.
I've done literally thousands of threat risk assessments and PIAs on land, on sea, air, and space. And I still think one of the best drivers to this day is the crown jewel assessment for sure. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that is the tabletop exercises, right? If it's one thing we don't do enough of, doing a regulatory once a year, an annual tabletop exercise, whether it be for insurance or whether you're in the financial sector, it's mandated once a year. That's something that should almost be continuously, I would suggest, right? Mm-hmm. Cyber risk and privacy as well. They go hand in hand, but they're at odds, which we can talk about if you want. But it needs to be continuous, right? It needs to be part of the cadence of the organization at the end of the day.
Okay. And let's say, I'm working with you guys as a partnership. There's an unusual pattern. What happens next?
So let me go back to just build on some of the things you said there. We'll get there. I think for cyber, I like the words due diligence.
Yeah.
And you can have an unlimited budget. I can give a CISO an unlimited budget. Mm-hmm. You cannot guarantee 100%. Anybody that does, I want it in writing, I want to guarantee. You just can't, because the adversaries are effective. They have tools, they have funding, and that puck keeps moving, right? Mm-hmm. I've heard it said that, when you're defending an organization with cyber, you're the goalie in the net, but there's 6 shooters all taking shots, and you're going to stop maybe the first 24, but the 25th one's going to get in, right? So due diligence, I think, is critical. Tabletops, when I was at Mandy, we had a lot of fun with these. We'd sometimes hire actors, we put commercials, we'd, have people actually acting on phone calls, all of that, because you want the executive teams and organizations to understand the worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. It helps getting people aligned and wanting to invest in some of those right areas. Right. Again, if you think of the CISO's role of enabling innovation and reducing risk, the CISO's job on a board is to present both of those scenarios. Mm-hmm. And okay, if I'm only allocated this much budget, then we'll invest in these things, but recognizing it's not fully comprehensive, right? I mean that's fair as long as everybody's on side with it, and no one's ever going to get full budget for all of that. So due diligence, I think, is absolutely critical. Back to your situation, and then I think if you look at your particular situation, your breach that you described, we do see, unfortunately, where something happens. There's a stat out there that 70% of the time in the next 6 to 9 months, you're going to see something else come at you again, because in the dark web, it's been noted that someone had a successful attempt with you. It's not great. It's not good news, but you want to then look at, well, what are the things that I absolutely need to harden today in the event that someone came back at me next week?
Right.
And that's huge too. So that's a big part of C3SA's business. We do dark web, not just intelligence and monitoring for clients, but we do controlled acquisitions through law firms as well, right? Meaning that when the client wants evidence that their banking information has been compromised through a supplier or another vendor or a customer, right? We'll go out and purchase that. We'll go out and acquire it in a forensic manner and within a legal framework, right? But at the end of the day, that is a large piece that still remains unaddressed, right? On most of these ransomware attacks.
Sure.
In the public today, right? Is that data is still somehow, some way, to Greg's point earlier, it's being exfilled, right? And Mimic can actually help provide.
If I summarize maybe some of what you're saying or what we're talking about here, because you had a situation doesn't mean you go out and just buy the next tool the next day. It's actually understanding as much as you can, about that playing field and what happened and how, and this kind of intelligence. Intelligence is absolutely king, whether you're in football, you're in baseball, you're in cyber. I mean, what you can learn about the adversary and their potential tactics, because you can't defend everything. You got to look at, the most likely, and then what are you trying to defend the most?
And that's what I was going to ask about next, actually, is just in terms of, so you've got more intelligence than ever coming in. There's a lot of things that you could potentially react to. Part of the key is really understanding, your risk and having good sort of practices in place for how often do we update that? Are we speaking even the same language when it comes to the CISO and like the rest of the organization and helping people to understand how this impacts the risk? Have you seen any good practices to help an organization assess or make decisions based on the intel that they're getting?
I'm going to add one shameless plug, which is a lot of companies, they buy Mimic for ransomware as the main use case. And in the first week or two, we see light up on change because we are hardening and then deflecting anything that is attempted change, authorized or unauthorized, is just not part of normal. And so you see a whole number of software subscriptions that companies don't think are updating, but they are. And so gaining control over those things are just one that I would strongly recommend, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, it doesn't mean that those don't persist moving forward, but if a company or a security team doesn't know that those are automatically updating, as an example, that's a huge risk exposure. And so we provide that visibility where you can then put it back into the profile and say, okay, this is now going to be part of normal, and they know that it's happening. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you have any thoughts as well, Jarett, in terms of knowing, when to react and when to just continue to gather intelligence?
I would say, sometimes that's important too, like your response. Even more important is to know when to call the ball, right? And say that this response effort, we might as well just go straight into recovery. And again, like another shameless plug with Mimic, right? Is that last line of defense with the recovery capability. Right? Yeah, we've got that resilience baked in.
Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about that, but we're thinking ahead. And if you factor a scenario where, as you said, you had a breach, let's say it's a ransomware situation, it's come at an application, Mimic's defending, our application immutability is going to say, wait, this is ransomware. We're going to let ransomware land in our controlled way. Pieces on the exterior of the immutability shield will let that fall, and obviously report gets back through the ransomware as a service dashboard. Fine. But what we've also confirmed is that there is a real threat actor with command and control in that environment. That application still stays up, but we don't know what's going to happen next. So we have built, and more to come in the future, but we built a capability where we can snapshot that with a recovery point of 0, so very current data, take it out of the affected environment and move it to something that's hygienic.
Okay.
And so more to come on that. We think that's a really important thing, because where you see very significant breaches, ransomware or not, and applications come down, the understanding of what actually happened can take weeks, and the idea of getting critical apps back can take weeks upon those weeks, and that's what we're trying to go and address.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I really like the point that you made around sort of, it's not, don't just kind of go rushing out to buy a bunch of tools to kind of solve your problem. You got to assess and think first. And I think depending on, who has the accountability in an organization, sometimes that is kind of the knee-jerk reaction, is to just go buy all the stuff, right?
We're better today. We bought the stuff. Yeah. Who's going to implement it? Yeah.
And I think from a board perspective, that's something to think about as well. If people are just telling you they'll just buy all the things to like fix all the things and that's it, and we don't need to put into place any new practices or governance or anything like that, or to really look at how well trained or prepared we are from a readiness perspective, then that's something to ask about, I think, as well. I think we're naturally turning towards, what does the future look like? If you were to gaze into your crystal ball, do you have any sense of, what's coming down the road in the next 2 to 3 years?
A lot of AI things
Mm-hmm.
that we haven't imagined yet.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that folks on the good side are using AI to drive efficiency and be more effective with our email writing and just all of those things, building code. The adversary has access to very similar tech. And again, I was in Black Hat in a session where the general synopsis I was hearing from this room was they're expecting volume of attacks coming at us to be 4 to 5 times in the next couple of years, because there's AI bots now that are going to be able to go and do a whole bunch of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 of a threat attack without a human even being involved. And so I am concerned with the ability of traditional technology being able to keep up with that. Yeah. Which again, that's why I'm very bullish on what we built. Instead of trying to see all of those things and get them all into a filter and hopefully catch all of them, we're just saying, look, this is good. We know it's good. We're going to drive deflection from it, which it's all about speed. It's, as that volume happens, it's even harder to drive speed because the volume's higher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest concerns is bot-on-bot attacks, like that's coming, if it's not already here. And I'm always worried about the rigidity of our governance and our risk and our compliance programs that we put in place for AI, for instance, with the risk management framework, right? Where there has to be a human in the loop. So on the good side, if we're the good side of the bot, we have to have a human in the loop on that attack that comes in. But yet the bad guys on the other side, they don't have to play by the same rule set. So that the playing field's not level, which will give them an advantage, right? That is certainly something that I see coming, and it's a wider problem because it's not a broad stroke in terms of our AI governance, right? That's going to address every use case out there, certainly in the case of defense, cyber defense, and cyber resilience.
There's a lot of people who have a lot of work to do, in this space. And I know that ransomware is very big business. I know that they are AI enabled. I know that they are very well armed, for the future. What's something that gives you hope for the good guys?
Cut.
What? Cut.
We'll now take an intermission.
I was hoping you catch that. I have 2 boys, 19 and 21. They're both in internships, and they're both in cyber, and they absolutely love what they're doing right now. They're both working for financial institutions and learning about vulnerabilities and learning about quantum computing. And I think we need to look for every opportunity to give good the advantage. Because if you listen to Kevin, Mandy, or others talk, they'll say that generally the adversaries have more advantage because of some of the things you just described. We have regulations; they have no regulations, right? It's wild, wild west in some regard there. So, I think for good, not taking our eye off the ball, and in cyber there is a tendency to want to protect everything. And I would encourage companies to have a hierarchy. What are the most critical things that we have to drive the highest amount of protection for? And overly invest in those to make sure that those stay. And it's fine to roll out more generic things across all other endpoints. There's a price point where all those things matter. So, I think what gives me hope is people actually devising a plan where they're prioritizing specific things. CISOs feel like they can enable innovation while controlling the risk that goes along with it, and most important, staying on that plan. If I think of my time in Mandy, and Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. The best companies, they have a playbook, and it's even down to individually named people with cell numbers, and they can stick to it and they can act on it. But we see many times where something bad happens and that just gets thrown out the window, and people that are just more bullish tend to take over and things lose control.
I think I'm most hopeful for innovation, kind of like Mimic, kernel innovation, right? Is the innovation that's to come in the future, right? And really enable the teams and the humans that are behind it, and automating some of those workflows, right? And hoping to advance our field, whether it's the security side, the defense side, or the resilience side. But I hope with, as AI is coming in, and is becoming more ubiquitous everywhere, is that we can capitalize on that, right? And use it to advance our programs moving forward as well. And our people, like our human capital and our tool set.
AI is not a bad thing. AI is a great thing, and AI can give good the advantage if used right. Mm-hmm. And we absolutely should be in every way.
That's great. Thank you. Empowering people and innovation, super important. And also, Greg, I liked your advice in terms of having a plan and sticking to it. Yeah. I recently gave a talk on healthcare systems resilience, and the number of organizations who didn't have a plan going into COVID and what happened. And now, they're all trying to look at and ensure that they all have plans, for instance. I think it applies across so many different sectors and so many different situations to help as well. One last thing I'll just ask you guys. I really appreciate the conversation today. If you were talking to a CISO, what is one question that they could be asking today, asking of themselves or asking, their organization?
One of the best questions that I'm going to steal from Kevin, because he said this many times, Kevin Mandia.
That's not fair.
Yeah. Well, you know what? So look, we had a last week we had a dinner at Black Hat, and he came and spent time with our guests, and it's just so great. But it's on point. Boards would say, hey, what do I ask my security team? What do I ask my CISO to help drive better defenses? And the answer is, pick someone who's very capable on the team and ask them, if you were to breach our company today, one, how would you do it? And how would we know that you did it? Very simple.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
You have a lot of insider knowledge just within a team, understanding where some of the risks are without having to do big, long drawn out consultative engagements. And sometimes you can fix some of these things real quick. That's the point.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I just released an episode today that talked about puzzle solving. And if you can place something in front of your team as a puzzle to be solved, then you get everyone in and working to find out what that solution is. So that's great. Thank you. Jarett?
I would basically say, if it's true that there is no such thing as 100% coverage in your cyber defense program and your cybersecurity posture that you have out there today, can you prove that you aren't compromised, right? And if you are, what are the top 3 things, right, that we should be focusing on right now immediately today?
Interesting. Can you prove that you're not compromised? Right. Okay.
Right. And then also, what are the top 3 critical things that we need to focus on?
Amazing.
Right? Where are we going to have the biggest losses? Whether it's financial, whether it's reputational, whether it's morale, productivity, on the factory floor, right? Where is it?
Okay. Thanks, Jarett.
You're welcome.
Good thinking ones. Well, thanks so much for the conversation today, and thank you for listening. And if you haven't subscribed yet to Wire for Change, I'd encourage you to do so to keep up with the strategies, technology, and people who are leading change. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amy.
Appreciate it.